Hi everybody, if you don't know me already, my name is Kaylee. I'm a gut health nutrition coach, so I help people to overcome their chronic gut and digestive issues using the principles of ancestral nutrition as well as some other holistic health principles. And in today's video, I am going to be talking about what your poop says about your health. So I'm excited about this topic because it's something that you can do at home. You can observe your own bowel movements and you can tell a lot about your health, and then you can tell what kind of things you need to change to improve your digestive health and really improve your overall health. So I'm going to be going over a few things to look at, what is considered normal, what's not, what causes your bowel movements to get off in these certain ways, and exactly what you can do to get those perfect healthy bowel movements. So yeah, if this is something you struggled with or you just want another tool in your toolbox to improve your health, then I think you'll enjoy this video a lot. And also, I want to let you guys know before we get too far into the video, I just created a free training that I released in my Facebook group. So it's only in my Facebook group. I have a lot of free trainings in there that are only in that group. And this one is on how to get complete bowel movements plus fully eliminate every time you go. So if you're dealing with constipation in the sense you might be going every day, but you're only getting a little bit out, it's those little rabbit pellet poops, or you go to the bathroom and you feel like there's still something in there that just won't come out, then you're definitely going to want to check out that video, because I basically go over, if you're dealing with that, how to make it so that you actually get everything out when you go. So after this, go down below, check out that link, and then you can watch that video and learn even more about how to have great bowel movements. But back to this video. So basically I want to go over texture, color, amount, frequency, and other things that are in your stools, and what's normal, what's not, what to do about it. And also I'll give you some tips to improve as I go. So first, texture. So ideally you want what's a 4 on the Bristol stool chart, if you've heard of that. And if you haven't, you can look up Bristol stool chart and you can see it goes, it shows you different like consistencies and it gives them numbers. So a 4 is what you want. But basically what that means is you want this like sausage shaped poo that is like soft enough, but it's still firm, it's staying together, it's not breaking apart in a bunch of places. It can break apart in 1 or 2 places, but you don't want it like falling apart. You want it to like be cohesive together, but you don't want it like dry, you don't want it rocky, you don't want it like giant and hard to pass, but you also don't want it so soft that it's like falling apart and more on the diarrhea end of things. So yeah, you want that nice firm sausage, but you can go too far either way. So if your stools are very soft, now this can be just a little bit too soft, or this can be full on diarrhea. So obviously there's a spectrum here. If they're too soft and you are tending towards diarrhea or just too soft, there's a few things that can cause this. So one, it can just be food poisoning or getting sick. Diarrhea, loose stools help you to flush things out really quick. So if you were, exposed to something that caused food poisoning, that's why you tend to get barfing and diarrhea, is because it flushes things out quickly. And then again, if you have like the flu or a stomach bug, anything like that, it's a way to flush toxins out quickly or flush things out quickly. So that's one case, but obviously you're going to know when that is, and you're going to know when that's done, it passes, and you're good to go. So another thing is it's very often a microbiome imbalance, which I feel like I say on all my videos all the time, but it's true. When your gut bacteria is off and those pathogenic microbes overgrow, they love producing lots of gas. So if you're bloated all the time and gassy, that's also a microbiome imbalance. But basically, so when they produce gas, they can either draw more fluid to your colon or draw fluid away. So this can cause constipation or diarrhea. So in the sense of diarrhea, you're having all these gases that are drawing all this fluid to your colon, and it's just rushing everything through like a river after a giant rainstorm. So it's really important that you really focus on microbiome health, whether you're on the diarrhea side, the constipation side, or if you have alternating constipation and diarrhea, this is usually the cause. You have some gases that are drawing fluid too and some away, and they kind of switch off, and that's why you'll get the alternating. Also, just note you having too quick of motility of those stools going through the colon, but the gut microbiome imbalance is like the main thing if you're on the too loose of stool side of things. So then if you're on the other side, if you're on the rocky, dry, hard, lumpy, large, difficult to pass, painful to pass, or even if you're just getting little like rocks, they're usually just falling off the larger clump. It could be a microbiome imbalance. I just explained that. If it's drawing the fluid away and they're very dry, it slows down how quickly your stools are moving through your colon. They get even drier when they're moving slow because all the water is being absorbed back through your colon into your body. So you can get constipation that way. So another way you can get these dry, hard, lumpy stools is if you're stressed, that can lead to constipation. It's really, really hard to sit down and have a bowel movement when you're stressed. So if you're super stressed, if you have poor digestive health, that impacts everything later on. So if you are having difficulty digesting food all along the process, that can definitely pass the burden onto the bowels and really slow things down. If you have just a poor diet, if it's really hard to digest these foods, if you're adding too much bulk to your stools from having tons and tons of fiber, that will slow things down. That'll make your stools larger. They'll make them harder to pass. And then a huge one is if you don't have enough time in the morning typically, but whenever you like to have a bowel movement, if you don't have enough relaxed time to just sit there and go, then you're often not going to get everything out, and this can lead to constipation. So these are all huge causes for constipation. And basically if you have those too hard of stools, you're leaning towards constipation. So if you want to learn more about how to address gut dysbiosis and what's the whole deal with that, how to fix it, I'll link that video above. And then also I have a playlist that's all about how to go from constipation to having daily healthy bowel movements. I share my story of how I did, and then just lots of tips on the most common root causes. I go more in depth into everything I talked about. So if you want more on that, I'll link that playlist above too, and it has a few videos in there about overcoming constipation. So basically here, to get the best texture for your stools, you want to identify if you tend to go too far on the constipation side or too far on the diarrhea side, and then figure out why based on what I just said and address those. And if you alternate, again, definitely check out that gut dysbiosis video because that'll help you a lot if you're alternating. Yeah, so that's it for texture pretty much. So color. You want brown stools. That is probably ridiculously obvious, but yes, you want them to be that dark brown color. Most of this color is coming from the bile. Your liver makes bile, your gallbladder stores it, and then when you eat fatty foods or some other things can trigger it too, like bitter foods and like acidic foods can also trigger bile to be released, so that it can emulsify the fat, which is digesting the fat and help you absorb the nutrients out of fat. And then yeah, that's how that kind of works in a very quick nutshell. So bile is really important. It's a huge part of digestion, a huge part of digesting fat. So the bile that comes out, that is what the main thing that's turning your stools brown. So if you have pale stools that look a little bit more maybe yellow, just lighter, off-white color, that is an indicator that you are not having bile in your stools. The main thing that causes this is if you have very sluggish bile or you have stones. They can be bile stones, gallbladder stones, or liver stones, basically anything in that little pathway of the liver to the gallbladder to the common bile duct that goes into your digestive system. So if that bile there is sluggish or stoned up, then it's going to block it from coming into your digestive tract and into your stools. So if you have pale stools, you really want to work on naturally getting rid of these stones and naturally improving your bile flow and liver health. Please don't get your gallbladder removed if you haven't already, because you don't need to. You can absolutely heal this naturally. You can remove stones through natural methods. So yeah, just know you don't have to remove an organ. If you have already, don't feel bad about it. But if you haven't, know that you don't have to. And if you want more info on that, just let me know. I haven't made a video about liver health and liver detox yet. So if you want to know more about that, just let me know below. I'm happy to make a video on that one too. But yeah, so there can be other colors too. That's kind of the most common one you'd see of your stools being off, would be that very pale color. Also note that what you eat can affect your stools. So I think it's like if you eat beets, they can be very red. So if you have a very funky colored stool for like a day or two and then it goes back to normal, don't worry about that so much. It's more the patterns over and over again. But if you have another weird color stool and it's always happening, it'd be good to look into that more too. So then for the amount, you want a full elimination. So that's going to be based more on feeling and getting to know your body based on how much you eat. Someone who eats twice as much as you will probably poo more often than you do. So everyone's a little different. So get to know your body and what feels like full relieving eliminations. And also it's kind of like, you know, if there's a teeny tiny little piece in the toilet, that's not a full elimination. So you get to know your body and what's full for you. So yeah, you're not really gonna poop too much unless you're having like diarrhea and everything's flowing through way too fast. And that really just means it's too much liquid because it moved through too fast. Yeah, so that's not really gonna be the main thing. It's mostly gonna be if you're not having full enough bowel movements that you're on the constipated side of things. And if that's your struggle, make sure to watch that Facebook training video that I mentioned, because I go over exactly what to do about too small of bowel movements and how to make them full relieving bowel movements. So yeah. And then frequency I wanted to mention. So normally you're going to have about 1 to 3 bowel movements a day. If you skip a day or two every once in a while, that's really not a big deal. It's more based on your feeling. Everyone's a little different. So I'm a mostly once a day, sometimes twice a day person, and I miss a day every once in a while. So everyone's going to be a little bit different, but get to know what your normal is. If you look it up online and it says every 3 days to 3 times a day is normal, that might be what a lot of people do, but that's not healthy at all. You should be going almost every single day. That is very, very important. So if you're going too much, you're probably having diarrhea. So if you're going like 4, 5, 6 times a day and it's very loose, if you're having very urgent stools, do all the stuff I mentioned for diarrhea earlier. And if you're having too little, so if you're not going every day, you're only going 4 times a week, or you're just going a very small amount. Basically, if you're not going often enough, you're dealing with constipation. So do the things I mentioned for constipation. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was other things that can be present in your stools and what those mean. So might sound a little weird, but this is an important thing. So one is food. Chunks of undigested food. Quinoa is huge for this. If you eat quinoa, you've probably noticed quinoa in your stools. It does not digest well. But there can be other foods in there as well. But basically, if you're noticing chunks of food, it basically means you are not digesting your food well. You could be eating too fast. You could have too low of stomach acid. You could be not chewing your food well. You could have a lot of issues going on, a lot of possible things, but you are not digesting your food well if you're seeing chunks of it. Also, you could be eating foods that are very hard to digest, like quinoa, but I wouldn't recommend eating tons of quinoa anyway. So it's kind of a balance, you know, but those probably are foods you're not dealing with great if they're ending up in like where you can recognize what they were in your stools. So just realize that. If your stools are greasy and you notice like fat bubbling up to the top, or if they're just very greasy, that's a sign of fat malabsorption. So basically bad absorption of fat, malabsorption. And this has to do with not having that bile release. So if you have pale, greasy stools, you really got to work on your bile, liver, gallbladder pathway, getting the bile flowing really well. Again, if you want to know more about that, just let me know. I'll make a video on it because it's kind of a big topic to cover here. Yeah, so if they're greasy, you're not having enough bile flow, you're having the fat malabsorption. And okay, if you have parasites or worms in your stool, you have a parasite infection. Probably kind of obvious. A lot of times you won't actually see them if you do have parasites. A lot of people are exposed, but also it can be important too that your stools is a way to get rid of them. So it could be you came in contact with a few and they got out right away. So I guess it doesn't necessarily mean you have a parasite infection. It means there was a parasite in your body. They can look very different. If you want to look them up, you can. Warning, it's a little gross, but yeah, if you want to see what those look like. And if you're doing any kind of parasite cleansing, oftentimes people use like a plastic fork or something to actually look more in their stools to see if they're getting them out. You don't have to do that. But if you want to know more about the parasites, that's kind of the direction that tends to go. But yeah, those can look very different. Usually they're a little bit paler in color. It really depends. You can have tiny little pinworms or you can have large worms. So yeah, it's not something you see that often. Sometimes it can be buried in there. But it is possible. That's something you can see. And if you are noticing a lot of parasites in your stools, that is something that should be addressed, because it's very common to get parasites. It's very common to never notice them. But if you have a lot, that means something's off in your body. You should not have a lot in your stools. So not super common, but if that is you, that is something you want to address. Mucus. So if you see a tiny bit of mucus from time to time, that's not a big deal. But if you see a lot of mucus or you see it very frequently, that can just be an indicator of gut damage, especially to the gut lining. If you see a lot, you probably have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Basically, those are like lesions on your intestines, accompanied by a lot of gut issues that go with them. So if you need help with that, let me know. I'm happy to help you with that. But yeah, and then the last thing I have is blood. So it's kind of similar to the mucus. If you notice a teeny tiny bit once or twice, like, you don't need to worry about it. But if it's a lot or if it's very frequently, that can be very concerning. Note the color of it. If it's very bright red, that means it's very fresh. So it's probably very close to the end, to your rectum. So like if you have a hemorrhoid or hemorrhoids and you're getting a little bit of bright red blood, that's not really something you have to worry about. I mean, obviously you want to treat the hemorrhoids and heal, but that's not like a huge red flag. If you're getting a lot of blood or blood and mucus, that's a huge sign of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, and those definitely need to be addressed. They can be completely healed holistically and through diet and lifestyle and stuff, but that is something very important so that you don't get worse and worse with that. So those are kind of the main things. So basically it's good after you go to the bathroom to just check your stools, see what is the texture like. Do you have that nice sausage texture, or is it too loose or too hard? Let's see, what's the color? Make sure it's brown. What's the amount? Are you having full relieving bowel movements? What's your frequency? And is there any weird stuff in there that needs to be addressed, whether that's food, parasites, mucus, greasiness, or blood? Yeah, so hopefully this was helpful, and now you have some tools when you go to the bathroom to look at your bowel movements and to assess what's going on in your body and see if there are things you need to fix. So yeah, I hope you found it helpful, and be sure to check out that Facebook training video that I mentioned. So basically it's a video kind of formatted just like my YouTube videos, and this one is on how to get complete bowel movements and fully eliminate every time you go. So I'm going to talk about what I did to go from having 2 to 3 bowel movements a week to having full regular bowel movements nearly every day. I'm going to go over what I've helped my clients to do, how they've gotten to having those little tiny bowel movements to having those full ones every day. So if you want to learn more about that, check that out. I have a link down below like usual. Yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If there's anything you want to see in the future, you can also let me know that. Yeah, if you could like it, subscribe, comment, share it with someone you know, anything like that is really helpful. Thank you for watching.